Week 3 of the fantasy football season, and he has tight end start sits every matchup this week. The first matchup, Thursday Night Football, New England Patriots at the New York Jets. So Hunter Henry, he's been moving up the rankings the last couple of weeks since the season started. Last week, a monster ball game. This week, in a matchup at the Jets, I know it's tough on paper, but this New England team really don't have a number one wide receiver, so at minimum, Henry will be the number 2 option in the passing game if someone emerges. So this week, I like him as a start, especially this season. The tight end position in the early going has been one of the weaker positions, if not the weakest position in fantasy football. Tyler Conklin is it. We haven't seen much out of him. And pretty much Rodgers, he's only targeting Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Braylon Allen out of the backfield, and Allen Lazard. Mike Williams has been non-existent. Tyler Conklin's been non-existent. And this week, it's tough to trust Conklin. He's a sit. Denver Broncos at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think Greg Dulcich down the line will have some value for fantasy owners, but right now we haven't seen much out of Dulcich, and this offense really hasn't done much at all, and in a pretty tough matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll stay away from Dulcich. He's a sit. Cade Otton last week, he had negative yards in that one. They tried an end around to him, lost 4 yards, so he actually had negative .40 fantasy points in Cade Otton. And Cade Otton at times he'll have some decent games as a big red zone target, but this week versus Denver and what we've seen from him so far, he's a sit. Houston Texans at the Minnesota Vikings. Dalton Schultz, I've been saying it for weeks now. He's the 4th or 5th option in this offense. Obviously, Stroud, Mixon, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and then Schultz is that 5th option in this offense. So Dalton Schultz, he didn't do much the first couple weeks. Last week, only 2 catches, 21 yards. And like I said, the targets aren't going to be there, or the looks. CJ Stroud has way better options than Schultz. So he's a sit. Johnny Munt, he's a sit. They have to wait for TJ Hawkinson to come back to this lineup. And it's still most likely 2 months away before Hawkinson returns. So pretty much this offense is around the 2 running backs in Jones, Ty Chandler, and obviously Justin Jefferson at the wide receiver position with Jalen Naylor and Jordan Addison. Los Angeles Chargers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hayden Hurst is a sit. This Charger team, it's pretty much been their running backs as well with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who's gone off so far in the first 2 weeks of the season, where the tight ends really haven't been involved with Justin Herbert so far this year, even though we know Herbert like Gerald Everett and Donald Parham over the last couple seasons, but obviously they're gone and off the team. So Hayden Hurst, we have to see multiple weeks of production for him to be considered an option. He's a sit. Pat Freiermuth, he's one of the better tight ends, I believe. He'll be a top 12 option most weeks. Is Freiermuth, number 2 option in the passing game behind George Pickens. And these are the type of tight ends you want to target, are those players that are going to be their number 2 or 3 targets in their offense. If a tight end like Dalton Schultz, like I said, is that 4th or 5th option, they're not really going to have appeal and value weekly. So Pat Freiermuth is a start this week. Philadelphia Eagles at the New Orleans Saints. Dallas Goedert, so far in the early going, it just hasn't been good for Dallas Goedert. I figured in week 2's ball game versus the Falcons, we were going to see more out of Goedert with A.J. Brown out multiple weeks with a hamstring injury, but obviously that didn't come to fruition. I still think Goddard's a back-end option, is that 12th to 15th range tight end, but this week I don't have much confidence in him, so I have him as a borderline option. If you now don't have other options, and out to the New Orleans Saints, they use a bunch of players. Jawan Johnson, Taysom Hill, Forster Monroe. I know Johnson and Monroe had touchdowns in week 1, but they're touchdown-dependent tight ends, and they're not guys I could trust week in and week out. And we even saw the Philadelphia Eagles shut down the tight ends and Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft in week 1, and Kyle Pitts really didn't do much in week 2, so they're both sits. And Taysom Hill, he don't have a consistent workload. If they said Hill's going to get 12, 15 touches per game, I think that would be fine, and he would be a start at the tight end position. But now with Alvin Kamara off to a monster start, Taysom Hill's snaps have been going down a little bit, and Derek Carr is moving that football more down the field than the trickery plays. Green Bay Packers at the Tennessee Titans. Luke Musgrave, I had some hopes he would come in this season and take the next step. And now with the injury to Jordan Love and Malik Willis, most likely a quarterback once again, you can have trust in any of these tight ends. Pretty much Jaden Reed, the only player that has flex appeal besides Josh Jacobs this week. Obviously, he's a top 15 back for fantasy owners off this Green Bay Packer team. And this Titan defense is pretty decent. So this week, Musgrave and Kraft sits once again. Chika Kwango found the end zone in week 1 for this Tennessee Titan team with the Chicago Bears, but last week it was a quiet ball game, and he's another tight end where he has upside for sure, but this offense very inconsistent, and you can't trust him. He's a sit. New York Giants At the Cleveland Browns, Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, it's a timeshare for the most part at the tight end position. But this Giant offense, pretty much there's no one you want to own for the most part, besides obviously Malik Neighbors, Devin Singletary. He's been decent so far in the early going, and Wan'Dale Robinson has some deep league appeal, but the tight ends aren't getting targeted. And Daniel Jones, he's one of the bottom half quarterbacks in the league. So this week in a tough matchup, going to the dog pound, one of the better defenses over the last few seasons. Both these tight ends are easy sits. David Njoku, there's a chance David Njoku might play in this Week 3 ball game. And if he does, he's a start because, like I said, the tight end position's been weak. Week 1, David Njoku looked good before he went out with injury. Last week, he missed the ball game. So if Njoku suits up, and we know this Giant defense ain't all that great, he's a start. Jordan Akins, if he's filling in once again for David Njoku, he's not going to be a start. He only had one catch for 10 yards in the Week 2 victory at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's an easy sit. Chicago Bears at the Indianapolis Colts. The Chicago Bear offense as a whole just can't move the football down the field. Caleb Williams, in his first 2 games of his NFL career, he's taken big hits. He's turned the football over, and he's looked like a mid-quarterback, not a number 1 pick. I know there's going to be growing pains. I know great quarterbacks, it don't happen overnight, but this time of the season, right now, these tight ends you can't trust. I know Cole Kmet had a few catches, a better Week 2 than Week 1, but he's not having any impact, and he's the 4th or 5th option as well on this offense when everyone's healthy, behind DJ Moore, behind Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, and then Kmet and Gerald Everett. So both these tight ends, the production hasn't been there, and this offense hasn't been moving the football. They're both sits. Kyle Granson, he's a sit as well. He really hasn't done much. And this Colt team, the last 3 or 4 seasons, rarely target the tight end, no matter who the quarterback's been. Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Anthony Richardson, now Jacoby Brissett the last few years, and he's a sit. Miami Dolphins at the Seattle Seahawks, Jonnu Smith, he got some good work in that ball game last week in the tough loss, and with Tua going out with the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night. So a borderline option for me, Jonnu Smith. We know he's had fantasy appeal in his NFL career, going back with the Tennessee Titans, then last season with the Atlanta Falcons, he had some appeal. And this week with Skylar Thompson at quarterback for this Dolphin team, I think obviously a young quarterback and a backup quarterback, mostly their top targets are the tight ends. And when you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle with defenses all wrapped up trying to stop those guys on the outside and Devon Achane out of the backfield, Jonnu Smith's going to have a lot of seam work in the middle of the field, I believe, and get some open looks. So if you want to use him as a borderline option, I think that's fine. Noah Fant to sit. He's the 4th or 5th option as well in this offense, behind either Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet, whoever starts in this ball game for the Seattle Seahawks. Then you got DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had the best game of his career and a breakout performance last week. And also Tyler Lockett still could go out there and make plays. And Noah Fant, just like the Dalton Schultz situation, 4th or 5th option in the offense. Carolina Panthers at the Vegas Raiders, Tommy Tremble, Jatavian Sanders, both sits for me. But now at least Andy Dalton comes into the starting lineup, and he can't be any worse than obviously Bryce Young at the quarterback position. Bryce Young, he just can't hit open targets. He can't move the football down the field. And now for a number 1 pick overall last season, to go with the veteran Andy Dalton, who we know what we're going to get from him. A lot of interceptions at times, a lot of gunslinging, but at least he can move the football a little bit. Both these tight ends, you have to see multiple weeks of production for them to be fantasy options. They're both sits. Brock Bowers already a top 5, top 6 tight end, I believe, in fantasy football. Last week, another big game. Him and Davante Adams, the 2 main targets in this offense. And this week with a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers. He's a must-start. Baltimore Ravens at the Dallas Cowboys. Mark Andrews last week got off to a slow start, but he did finish with 9.90 fantasy points. And this Dallas Cowboy defense got shredded last week by the New Orleans Saints. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think Baltimore is going to pull out the victory in this one, and they're going to rely on Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Week 1, we know Likely went off with the monster ball game, 9 catches over 100 yards, and found the end zone. Last week, he was quiet, but this week, I think both tight ends get into the mix and make plays in their starts. And like I said, tight end position is very weak now to the Cowboys. Jake Ferguson, he missed last week's ball game with the knee injury, but if he plays in this one, he's a start for me. Last week, he tried to suit up as Ferguson, but he just couldn't give it a go. But I believe this week there's a decent shot he might play, and if he don't play, Luke Schoonmaker will be the starter. And he was pretty decent last week, but Schoonmaker is still not a tight end I would have confidence, especially versus this Baltimore team, coming off of 2 bad losses even though week 2 we saw Brock Bowers have a game versus them. Drew Maker, more of an unknown. He's a sit. San Francisco 49ers at the Los Angeles Rams. And now with Deebo Samuel out of the lineup, George Kittle, he's going to be in line for more targets and more work. And this week, a great matchup at the Rams that just got destroyed by the Arizona Cardinals. So George Kittle, he's a top tight end, I believe, still for fantasy football, even though I think his best years are going to be behind him and he's going to start to decline this season or next season, I think, Kittle. But now with Deebo Samuel out of the lineup, that just makes more targets and more opportunities for Kittle to go out there and make plays. Kobe Parkinson, he was silent last week, but that whole game you throw out the window, I believe, for this Los Angeles Rams team. Cooper Kupp now out multiple weeks. Someone's got to step up and make catches, either at the wide receiver position or tight end. But Kobe Parkinson in a tough matchup versus one of the best defenses in all pro football, I can't trust him because I think he's going to be an inconsistent option week in and week out. Detroit Lions at the Arizona Cardinals had 2 of the top 3-4 tight ends drafted going into the year, going at it in this one. And Sam Laporta, so far, he's been a big disappointment the first 2 weeks of the season. Week 1, 4 catches, 45 yards. And last week, non-existent, 2 catches, 13 yards. And now with Jameson Williams stepping up, and obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers who've been there for a few years now. Laporta's targets are going down a little bit, and Jameson Williams is getting more of the open looks and making the bigger plays. But this week at Arizona, like I said, with obviously tight end being a weak position, you got to throw Sam Laporta out there because he could go off at any time. Trey McBride, he's been a target machine in the early going. I know week 1 he didn't do much, but Trey McBride, he's locked in each and every week as a start. Sunday Night Football, Kansas City Chiefs at the Atlanta Falcons. And Travis Kelce, I thought next season would be the year we start to decline. But right now, it looks like in that passing game, the number one option is Rashee Rice. Pacheco out, I believe Kelce's going to get more looks. They're going to go with Carson Steele, Samaje Perine in the backfield is his Kansas City Chief team. Steele, obviously a rookie, no experience at all as a starting running back in the NFL. And Samaje Perine more in back and at times in between the tackles. And Kareem Hunt, I believe, will be mixed in as well as the season goes on. But in terms of fantasy football, I think Travis Kelce, this could be one of his better games this season. This Falcon defense is middle of the pack. And this Chief team, their offense hasn't looked good, and they're still 2-0 this year. Kyle Pitts is a start. Week 1, he had a touchdown. Week 2, he didn't do much versus the Philadelphia Eagles. But this Atlanta Falcon team knows they got to go out there and put points on the board if they want to pull off the upset victory versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And Kyle Pitts, we know he could run all the routes. We know he's a good playmaker. And this week, another week with him and Kirk Cousins having good rapport. I will put him in the starting lineup. And he was a top 6-7 tight end drafted in fantasy football. Now to Monday Night Football, the first of 2 Monday night games with a doubleheader this week. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Buffalo Bills. Evan Ingram, he pulled the hamstring. He's week to week right now. And we'll see if Evan Ingram plays in this ball game for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. Week 1, it was a bad performance, 1 catch, 5 yards. And now this week in a matchup at Buffalo, if he does play Evan Ingram, even though it's going to be tough for fantasy owners to trust him if the reports aren't good going into the week, to wait till Monday night for him. So if Ingram plays, he's a start, even though his upside's definitely gone down as the season has started the first couple weeks of the year. And Brenton Strange last week had a good ball game. Trevor Lawrence, we know he likes targeting the tight end since he got into the NFL. But Brenton Strange, even after coming off a good ball game last week, I can't trust him in a matchup with a good defense on Monday night. He's a sit. Dalton Kincaid so far, first game of the season, he didn't do anything. And then last week, 7.10 fantasy points in PPR league. So Kincaid, he was taken as the 5th or 6th tight end in fantasy football. So this week, I think Kincaid can have one of his better games. And nothing's really going on in the passing game from Buffalo. Besides Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel hasn't done much the first 2 weeks. Keon Coleman had a decent week 1 and then a goose egg in week 2, even though the Bills didn't have to throw the football a whole lot with a great defensive performance and James Cook running for 3 touchdowns. But I believe Dalton Kincaid this week could make some plays, and he's a start in the final game of the doubleheader on Monday night. Washington Commanders at the Cincinnati Bengals. Zach Ertz last week had a good ball game, but I don't know if Zach Ertz is going to be consistent week in and week out. He's definitely someone to add off the wire if you need help at the tight end position with either injuries or players underperforming and you want to make a change. But Monday night, Zach Ertz, I have to see a little bit more out of him to put him in the starting lineup. But a young quarterback security blanket and best option at times is the tight end position, especially like a veteran who's Zach Ertz, who still could run the routes and has a great IQ for the game. And now to Cincinnati, Mike Gesicki's a start for me. Mike Gesicki, one of the hotter pickups at the tight end position. In an offense with the best quarterback he's played with in his NFL career. He showed some flashes a few years ago over there in Miami. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, the targets weren't going to be there. Then last season in New England, nothing was going on and no one was making plays and catching the football. But now I think he found a home in Cincinnati. In week 1, he would have had a nice game, but a touchdown got called back. Then a week later, they said it should have been upheld as a touchdown. And then last week, a big performance, 7 catches, 91 yards at Kansas City. So Mike Gesicki, he's definitely a target in the middle of the field. And I believe even if T. Higgins comes back in this ball game, he's still the number 3 target in the offense in the passing game. So that's tight end start sits every matchup for week 3 of the fantasy football season.